Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
What's up? What's down? What is going on around? I'm Paulo Leasing, founder of startupintaiwan.com. This show is to answer your questions about starting up in Taiwan, either for business, school, or just hanging around. So leave your questions in the comment section below. Our guest for today is Claudia Wild. And our topic for today, by the way, is Taiwan a place for digital nomads? So Claudia Wild from Germany is a cultural chameleon and seasoned copywriter, content creator, and translator. She has 9 years of experience writing multilingual content, running digital marketing campaigns, and developing e-learning material. Multiple years of self-organized remote work have made Claudia a digital workplace aficionado that easily adapts to any circumstances. Honed her skills of working independently with little to no direction and have led her to become well-versed and thrive in a digital workspace. Well, Claudia was in Taiwan for more than a year on an entrepreneur visa and moved to Canada 2 years ago. Claudia, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hi, Paulo. Thank you for having me. It's nice to be on the show. I'm really excited.
Finally, I'm able to interview you, but sadly, you're not in Taiwan. So, first question: why Taiwan? What brought you here in the first place?
So, actually, Taiwan was a complete random happenstance. It came out of nowhere. I didn't even know much about Taiwan before I came here, but I was open to anything. I was open to Asia, whatever. And a friend of mine who I'd lived with in another country beforehand messaged me out of the blue and was like, "Hey, I live in Taipei now. You should come visit." And I was like, "Well, I work online now. I have nowhere else to be. Why not go to Taiwan?" And I guess I'm kind of ashamed to admit I didn't really do much Googling beforehand. I just booked the flight and I was like, "I'm off. Let's do it." And that is literally what brought me to Taiwan. I arrived in Taipei like a couple weeks later and I fell in love with Taiwan.
Yes. Well, I guess the next question is gonna be like almost like, what's your first impression of Taiwan, basically?
That it was a really neat hybrid between. So if I lived in China for quite a long time, a few years ago, and I've visited Japan and other places in Asia. And it was this kind of neat hybrid between, the Chinese language, but also kind of Southeast Asia and, a bit of Japan thrown in there. And I was just enamored. It was kind of love at first sight. I was like, oh, people have a higher English level, but they also speak Mandarin. So I can, keep working on my Mandarin skills because I spoke Mandarin already. And I got here and I was like, this place is like tropical paradise. You have, the urban city, but then you have all these mountains. You can get right into the jungle right from the city. It was, for a digital nomad, for a remote worker, that's like, it's what you want. You want to be in the city, but you also want to be in nature and you want to have your social life. And that's Taipei and Taiwan had it all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you considering another country to do your job as they say, location independent content creator? And then the other question is, what was your deciding point that led you to choosing Taiwan?
So interestingly enough, it was a toss up between Taiwan and Mexico. I was in Canada, so I went from Germany to visiting my parents in Canada for a while because I don't see them very often. And so I was in North America, and Mexico, would have made sense because it's a very short flight. I'd never been there. It has been on my list. It's very frequented by location independent workers. It's really budget oriented. There's a lot to see. The weather's nice. And there was Taiwan. And initially I had a project going on with a friend of mine in Beijing. And we had a project meeting in Beijing that was going to be in March of that year. It was January. And I was like, oh, I could go to Mexico, but I could also go to Taiwan and then, stay in Taiwan for 3 months and then hop to my next meeting. That would be really economical, more economical than getting from Mexico to Asia. So that was actually my point was, my toss-up point was like, oh, Taiwan was only supposed to be this like intermittent stop in between, but it ended up like I just ended up staying in Taiwan.
And this is
I did.
before, and this is before COVID, right?
Yes, this is pre-COVID. This was beginning of 2018, like January 2018. Yeah.
So I'll quickly shift the gear. You were on an entrepreneur visa here. Were there any other options for you to stay so that you could do your job as a digital nomad legally?
So I'm not going to hold back here. When I first came to Taiwan, I was here on the 90-day visa exemption because I didn't know Taiwan. I was going to be, you know, half vacation, half working, but I was totally paying taxes in my home country, which was Germany, and I have a freelancing business there. So I was going to kind of scope out the possibilities. And pre-COVID, because I had clients in Germany and in Asia, it worked out quite well for me to be in Taiwan for, you know, maybe 3 to 6 months out of the year, to be in Asia at least for 3 to 6 months out of the year, depending on how long the visas ran. And, you know, then I'd spend the other 6 months out of the year being in Germany, working with clients, working with my business partner. And that worked out well. And of course, global mobility was all of a sudden stunted for a while because of COVID. So then there was a question of, you know, there are no more tourist visas. There are no more visa exemptions. What is a girl to do when her location independent global mobility is restricted? So I looked into the different options. I did apply for the entrepreneur visa. That seemed to be, at that point, it seemed to be the only option because I'm a dual citizen. I'm a German-Canadian dual citizen, and I entered Taiwan on my German passport, which immediately disqualified me from teaching English on the side, which was most people's initial option. I went to the Ministry of Labor and they basically flat out said, no, if you're here on your German passport, you can't teach English, even though you have a Canadian passport. And I was like, well, that settles it. So I kind of went through this list of like ticking off different boxes, trying to figure out what I could do without, you know, undermining my own location independent workflow. So, you know, some people were like, oh, you should teach English for a while. You can get a visa like that. Oh, maybe there was also like the talk of maybe one could get a student visa, but student visas don't exist in that capacity in Taiwan. And so they stopped the student visas for a while due to COVID. And then a friend of mine, a Swedish friend of mine, he was like, well, you know, I'm looking into this entrepreneur visa. He is a founder as well, and a digital nomad. And he's like, why don't you look into it? You know, you have a kind of a startup, you have your own business, you could maybe do something more here, look into it. And so I did look into it, and that is what came out of it, with all the other options basically off the table at that point because it was already like mid 2020. The entrepreneur visa seemed like the best way to at least get my foot in the door for more legal options to stay in Taiwan. Even though it might only be a year, maybe I wouldn't meet the requirements to extend it. At least I could get my foot in the door as an entrepreneur, you know, maybe make some connections and see after a year where I could go from there.
Okay, so at some point it looks like Taiwan will open up soon for foreigners. Would you recommend Taiwan as a place for digital nomads like yourself?
I would say absolutely. However, I would also say that I think the ramifications of working and moving around to different countries have now changed a bit due to COVID. So you have to be thinking of, are you going to have to apply for visas everywhere now, wherever you go? Are there still going to be visa exemptions? So that's kind of the toss up. I haven't heard from Taiwan yet if they're going to reinstate, you know, the tourist exemption visa. Maybe now due to COVID, they're going to make people apply for visas again. So I would think from my pre-COVID knowledge as a digital nomad, pre-COVID, I would have been like, for sure, everyone should go to Taiwan doing a remote, like a workation or, you know, a location independent soiree of 2 to 3 months. You know, I'd be all over that. However, you also have to think about like the tax implications. Do you already have a business outside of Taiwan? Is it feasible? What kind of legal gray zone are you in? But those are just general questions when you talk about location independence and digital nomadism. I think Taiwan's a great budget destination for digital nomads, not as budget as most of Southeast Asia, but it has a high quality of life and really friendly people and amazing nature. So I'd say anyone who wants to be a digital nomad in Taiwan should definitely go for it.
Okay. One of the points you mentioned before was that the validity of the Taiwan entrepreneur visa is not enough to build a profitable startup. And this quote unquote profitable startup is one of the ways to get an entrepreneur visa extended. Could you tell us about this concern?
So I wouldn't call this a concern per se, because going into a Taiwan entrepreneur visa doesn't necessarily mean that you're going into it as a digital nomad. It might be an option for a digital nomad. However, the entrepreneur visa kind of requires you at the back of your mind, maybe not legally, but at the back of your mind to think about, this visa is actually for me to come to Taiwan to start a business in Taiwan. So it's supposed to be this like kind of springboard to your business entity in Taiwan. And most digital nomads or most location independents and remote workers, they have their business entities outside of Taiwan. So it only makes sense if, as a digital nomad, you're also maybe thinking that you want to either take your business out of the country you were in before or found a new venture in Taiwan, because that way you will be able to shoot for that extension, for the profitable startup extension. So I'd say, it only becomes a concern if you want to stay longer than the year and you're finding yourself, I'm not knowing if your startup is profitable. Maybe you don't speak Mandarin. Maybe this is your first time in Taiwan and you don't know the culture well. You need a bit of time to, get your bearings and figure out what you're doing. And that takes off time for you to register the business and to be able to qualify for that entrepreneur visa extension, because the qualifications to extend the entrepreneur visa, you and I both know that it's the Taiwanese government sets a very high bar for that, the Ministry of Economics. So you definitely have to be cognizant of the fact as a digital nomad that that's what you're getting yourself into. I would say do your research beforehand.
Correct. I guess one of the ways that people could, or like foreigners could stay, is if they have a business abroad, is by opening up a rep office. But as you know, it also costs money to have a rep office, because there are things that you still need to pay for, like registering your business, renting like an office, like an official address for your company, and many other things. Anyway, so what were your deciding points for eventually leaving Taiwan for another country to do what you're currently doing?
Well, unfortunately, we just covered it. It was definitely the visa. So you did just mention that there's the option of the rep office or a branch office. I think you need to be very dedicated to your business model in Taiwan and have the option of having a lot of clientele in Taiwan so that your business model really fits Taiwanese locals. Because if you only focus on foreigners in Taiwan, that's a very small margin where you probably won't be able to hit those qualifications that you need to extend the entrepreneur visa or other visas. So after you have the year of the entrepreneur visa, if you don't qualify to extend it for another year or two, you do have the option to go on the job seeking visa. Now, here's where we come into this, very confusing situation where, you have your business, but being on a job seeking visa in Taiwan doesn't give you a permit to work. You're literally on a job seeking visa in order to be seeking a full-time job. So it's this kind of weird purgatory interim until you find either some other way to get a work permit or you leave. So there's really not, there's those two options, and there's really not much else you can do unless you look at your business and you say, can I profit from opening a rep office here or a branch office? Yes or no? Do I invest the money and the time and the effort to get through the red tape? Yes or no? And then that happens or it doesn't happen. For me personally, I didn't have as many clients in Taiwan as I did abroad. And at the time, it would have been a huge money investment, because in Germany, you can register as a freelancer basically for free. You can basically open up a business for free and start freelancing and get a tax number and everything. And just the thought of me having to pay like, I don't know, it's anywhere between 20 and 50,000 NT, depending on who you use to start a branch office or a rep office. That's already a big investment as it is. And if you have to, go and push for clients and stuff, it's a lot of work. And I think you definitely need to sit down and think about if it's profitable for you, especially if you're location independent. So I sat down, I talked to my boyfriend as well, and we're like, do we want to, because rent in Taipei, so living as a digital nomad in Taiwan is great, especially if you're living outside of Taipei though, because rent is dirt cheap. I used to live in Kaohsiung and was paying like, okay, let's use US dollars. I was paying like $250 US a month for rent for like a massive place. It was amazing. I loved it. And I was like, oh my God, my life is so great. I'm living the budget digital nomad life. And then I moved to Taipei and got like a quarter of the space and paid double as much. And I was like, oh God, this is terrible. Why? So that is kind of what happened. And we're like, how far are we willing to compromise the rent that you have to pay in Taipei, because most of the networking and professional opportunities are in Taipei to get clients? Or, do we move on for a while and hang out somewhere else for a few years and then return to Taiwan eventually in a different climate that is not so very COVID-y?
Oh yeah. Just to give our audience like a brief background of what you're talking about, the difficulties in like setting up a rep office or being on a job seeking visa. In Taiwan, you're not allowed to actually take money as like as a salary or as a salary for your job if you're on a rep office visa. And that's because the purpose of rep office is just for you to talk to customers here. But in terms of sending them some invoice, you will have to route it to your, let's say, if your main office is in Germany, then the German office is the one who should give the invoice and should receive the money on your behalf. The same with being on a job seeking visa. You're not supposed to officially receive money from, let's say, part-time work, because that will trigger like the tax office to see that, a foreigner A receive a certain amount from this company, and it will trigger them to actually look into your case. And if that happens, then it's going to be a big problem for you. And this is just an information for some of those who are probably asking, why didn't you just take the job seeking visa or rep office? What do you think could have been in place to keep you here in Taiwan?
I would say probably a more, not necessarily, I think lenient's not the right word to use here. Perhaps a more early startup or early venture friendly environment that also welcomes founders that are freelancers and maybe want to start founding something from the bare minimum, who maybe are also new to Taiwan. And even if they speak Mandarin, regardless of if they speak Mandarin or not, they, need some time, kind of almost like an integration period to feel comfortable with the country, feel comfortable with the workings of Taiwan, feel comfortable with the language, a bit of time to get to know the business environment. Because for at least for the entrepreneur visa, because that's what I have experience with, it's a very short time period to be able to perform and meet these qualifications of, 3 million NT revenue in the very first year, and, hiring 3 Taiwanese locals. There are 2 more. There are a bunch, so there are about 4 different qualifications that you need to meet, or requirements that you need to meet. You can meet one of those requirements or all 4. I think the 4th one's never been met. You have to have like this special idea or business idea that benefits the Taiwanese
economy.
people, or Taiwan as a nation and the economy, right? So those are things that you for sure need to consider before applying for the visa, because if you don't immediately register your business when you start out on the entrepreneur visa, it really docks your time that you'll be able to make money. So I guess what I'm trying to say is everything that I've experienced seemed just like very money and very revenue focused. It was all about the finances and not so much about the, foreigners need some time to maybe land in Taiwan to figure out, what's going on, where do I go, where's my community, where's my support, how do I do this, how do I do that? Because it took me, I'd been coming to Taiwan on and off for the past 2 years before I went on the entrepreneur visa. And, as a traveling location independent person, sometimes you don't really integrate into communities. And when you decide to stay, especially if you're someone who's coming to Taiwan for the first time, you're going to want some time to integrate. And with the entrepreneur visa, you don't have that. It's like literally you get the visa and your time is starting now. You better make 3 million NT before the year's up, or you either have to go on the job seeking visa where you can't technically work on your startup, or you have to figure out something else. And I think that puts a lot of stress on new founders or people who've just gotten into freelancing, and it could be less stressful if it weren't so money and revenue focused.
Correct. I agree with you on that. And I think on the policy perspective, I think the government should also think that these people like you, or digital nomads, are also contributing to the economy indirectly, because maybe their mindset is that you're just taking away from the economy as opposed to contributing. Because if you look at it from with my small economics background, if you can actually look at it from a consumer perspective, that if you are bringing in money, let's say from your salary abroad, and consuming it here in Taiwan, then you're part of that consumption part wherein you help the local businesses, the local coffee shop, for example. And you could also look at it from a talent perspective. Let's say you're a very smart person. I've been with you and I've learned a lot from you just by hanging out with you. And I would say that there is an indirect way to like help the economy by sharing your opinion about how are things done, let's say in Germany or in Canada when you were here. So even your voluntary participation in helping out with the startup community here, being very active about helping out, is an indirect help to the economy. And I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe the government should consider this when they're actually coming up with visas, and how foreigners in general are contributing to the economy. That's just my opinion. But
no, I think that's great, and I agree. And I also agree that, contributing to the economy can have a lot of different facets and aspects. So if you're coming and you're staying for longer term, you're on par with a tourist on some level. You're paying for accommodation. So usually you're paying for short-term accommodation, which costs more and comes in form of short-term sublet rents, which are a bit more difficult to find in Taiwan. So usually you end up in a hotel or a hostel. And I never thought, at least, 3.5 years ago when I first came to Taiwan, I thought, you got pretty great quality for the money you paid for accommodation in Taiwan. And you had all sorts of different types of quirky, cool housing, and I really enjoyed it. Every place I stayed in had amazingly fast Wi-Fi, and I could get 4G that was just stellar. I could go work in the mountains and sit there with my laptop and just tether my 4G and be like super happy. Taiwan has so many of these cool experiences, and as a tourist or a traveling person who's maybe working online or whatever, you're paying into all these experiences as well. You're really stimulating the economy. You're paying for rent, you're paying for hotels, you're paying for food, you're exploring. Yeah.
I think you've already answered this question, but how do you see yourself coming back to Taiwan?
Well, either if tourist visas open up on some level, I could also see myself coming back if there was an option for creatives who have ideas and want to found perhaps on a different program than the entrepreneur visa, or maybe an amended entrepreneur visa program that isn't quite as money focused and revenue centered. I know there's also the gold card option. I actually might be, I'm still freelancing at the moment. I might be segueing into a more full-time remote job, which would still make me a digital nomad, but a remote worker and not a freelancer. So at that point, if you're a salaried worker earning, a certain amount of money, I could potentially qualify for the gold card. It would be great if the gold card restrictions and regulations also didn't have such a high financial bracket.
Mm-hmm.
They're really quite high. So it would be cool if, maybe there's the opportunity to lower that financial bracket a bit to encompass other remote workers who aren't earning quite as much as the 4,500 euro you have to present for the gold card. At least that was what it was the last time I checked.
It's still the same.
But it's still the same.
It's still the same, but that's just one of the points that you could actually get. So either you have that salary amount, or you are an expert in the fields that they have enumerated in their guidelines.
Yeah, precisely. And I think now I remember that there was a change before. People came in based only on salary, and now you have to have some sort of connection with economy and finance and have qualifications, which is fair. There are very many other different highly qualified professions, but not everyone qualifies for those exact kinds of professions. So it would be really cool to see the gold card maybe change and morph a bit to include people who maybe aren't as uniquely specialized as the current people they're offering it for.
Yeah.
So yeah, those would be my options, I guess.
Yeah, and one of the latest news, this is just like few days ago, is that they've actually lowered the number of years required to get an APRC for gold card holders. So if you're a gold card holder, you just need to stay here for 3 years, maybe working for a company, and then after that 3-year period, you can actually transition to an APRC, and which it's like a permanent residency status, which means you're not going to be tied to any job or any company, and you can do whatever you want here in Taiwan to survive.
Sweet. Maybe that can be my next goal. Gold card and en route to APRC.
There you go. Hey, let's do a fast round. So basically just tell me what comes to your mind. What's your daily breakfast?
Usually chia pudding made with coconut. So like overnight chia oats with coconut cream.
Very specific. What show are you currently watching on Netflix?
Oh man, so I just finished watching Kim's Convenience, which was fun because my parents are also immigrants. So I got, these kind of feels of what it's like to grow up with parents who are immigrants. And now my boyfriend and I are going to start watching Squid Game. No spoilers. We haven't started it. I'm a bit frightened because I'm seeing all of these crazy reviews going on, so I'm trying to keep myself out of social media for that, but I'm excited. Squid Game.
I bought the costume for Halloween. Anyway.
No spoilers.
Yes. Are you a morning or night person?
I'm for sure a morning person, 100%.
Android or iOS?
Oh boy, that's difficult. Well, currently iOS. For the past 4 years, I've been iOS.
Mac or PC?
Right now I'm between the two because my Mac is half broken. So in order to amend that, I'm like half using my iPad and half using my Windows laptop. So I'm an in-between. I'm in-between-Z, if that's an
Okay.
answer.
Thank you. What's your favorite games or board games or games?
Favorite games? I mean, video games or like...
Yeah, video games or board games.
I'm a huge Legend of Zelda fan, and for video
Wow.
games, and for board games, man, I've played so many board games in my life. One that I really enjoyed was Timefall. It's a French a game from a French board game startup that is like a tabletop RPG about time travel. It's really awesome. Everyone should check it out. It's a really awesome game.
Favorite movie of all time?
Oh no. Probably The Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
I'm just classic like that.
Favorite book?
The Hobbit.
The Hobbit. Okay, so thank you. That's the last question that we have for you. But before we let you go, what is your action item? How could we help you in this show?
In this show, well, actually, I enjoy following you and Startup Taiwan because I'm not in Taiwan anymore. It keeps me up to date with all the happenings and going ons in Taiwan, in the startup scene, in the business scene. So, I still kind of stay uniquely connected, even though I'm not there. And so when I do decide to come back, I'll still be up to date with everything that's going on. So you guys are already doing your part, keeping me updated, having people on the show so that I can still stay connected to Taiwan, which I love.
Well, because you're a digital nomad and you're always online anyway, you're always connected to Taiwan, no matter where you are. And we expect that you would visit us soon. And for our audience, we hope that you could also spread the word about what we're doing here by subscribing if you haven't done it yet. Again, thank you, Claudia, for joining us this show.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope to be able to come back to Taiwan soon and hang out with you guys.
Of course, we will see you around.
Awesome.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.